Ethan Hunt is back in the 8th Mission Impossible film, The Fellowship of the Ring, Dead Reckoning Part 2. Final Reckoning. Is this the greatest Mission Impossible yet? Okay, so in Final Reckoning, this picks up basically exactly where the last movie left off. Ethan Hunt is still tracking Gabriel and the evil entity, which is basically like an AI warfare type of thing. But the stakes are higher than ever because this is supposedly the last Mission Impossible film. Will Ethan Hunt stop the entity? Will he save the world? You'll have to watch Mission Impossible to find that out, because this is a spoiler-free review. In this movie, the feeling of dread is stronger than ever. They really build up this impending doom of the entity. Like, this is going to be the end for the whole world, and the stakes really do feel heightened. I like that it was trying to do some interesting commentary on AI in general, but it did feel a little out of place. It's not really the most intriguing villain plotline for me. It starts to kind of lean into feeling a little bit like the One Ring to rule them all from Lord of the Rings. There's this kind of aspect of the entity where it's tempting people, and there's also like no one person should have that kind of power. They can literally rule everyone. I felt like that was a little bit weird for a Mission Impossible movie, but you know what? When it comes to plot, for the last 4 or 5 Mission Impossible movies, it's not the most important thing. Because as long as you're feeding me cool action set pieces and you're putting the team in unique situations that are filled with suspense and humor, then I'm all for it. Unfortunately, though, this movie spends way more time than any other Mission Impossible movie on exposition. I swear 90% of the dialogue is just telling us what is happening in the movie. It doesn't need that. There's no real intrigue to the exposition. For example, the first Mission Impossible movie is an exposition-heavy film, and it focuses heavily on the plot. But it doesn't just give you all of the answers, it lets the audience do detective work, which in the end actually creates a very rewarding experience with it. In this movie, it basically just feels like Tom Cruise saying, hey, I'm at this end of the hallway, now I'm going to walk to that end of the hallway, and he's just explaining to the audience repeatedly what's happening on screen, what happened in the last movie, what happened in the last 6 movies. There's a lot of flashbacks to other Mission Impossible movies, and the plot in general just becomes kind of convoluted because of that. It tries to weave in all of these threads, but it doesn't trust us as an audience to remember any of that, so it's overly explaining everything, and to the point where it actually flashes back to something that happened only an hour prior in its own movie, because it's worried the audience is forgetting that. It's not the kind of like exposition that's entertaining. It's just, here's everything that's ever happened, here's everything that's happening right now, and that really gets in the way of a lot of the character dynamics that I usually find so entertaining in a Mission Impossible movie. These movies have always been very effective at having a team-oriented feel and offering opportunities for humor within that group, but really there isn't a lot of room for that because Ethan Hunt is spending a lot of the time in boardrooms talking with the president, and there's a lot of unnecessary businessmen, CIA type of scenes. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just too much, and it bogs down the movie. Like I said, once you get about halfway through the 3-hour runtime, the movie does pick up steam. Now, the Mission Impossible films have set standards of expectations when it comes to big stunts and action set pieces. And this movie does have those, albeit much farther and fewer between than really any Mission Impossible movie. For a movie that's just barely shy of 3 hours, I was kind of surprised at how little action there was overall. I do think the action is great. The whole biplane sequence is absolutely riveting. There is an extended underwater submarine sequence that is really suspenseful. Outside of that, though, there are some fight scenes and some other kind of little things that happen throughout that they didn't really grab me in the same way other Mission Impossible films have with its choreography or its action in general. So in Dead Reckoning, the previous movie, I remember having a feeling that there was just too many close-ups. Now, I was really forgiving of it because I knew the movie was shot during COVID. They had to adhere to 6-foot distance policies and wear masks, and so I figured they shot a lot of things in close-ups to kind of get around the fact that everyone couldn't always be in the same room together. But this movie, I'm pretty sure this was shot after the pandemic. It really started to bother me how much the film relies on extreme close-ups. I'm talking neck, head is all you can see. So we'll be in the middle of a boardroom scene, dialogue happening between people, and then it'll cut to somebody, and I'm like, oh, there's someone else in this room. I had no idea. And then spatial awareness becomes kind of confusing because there's so many close-ups. I was just begging for a few wide shots here and there throughout these dialogue scenes, and it very rarely gives them to you. And it created a very claustrophobic feeling for me. There's also like a member of the IMF team who, about halfway through the movie, I was like, who is this guy? They just weren't showing him because everything else is in close-ups, and then suddenly it cuts to a close-up of him, and I'm like, oh, who's that guy? Oh yeah, I forgot. They show him at the beginning, and he's a part of this team. So I don't know if that's a Christopher McQuarrie thing. I don't really recall that being an issue for me in the other Mission Impossible films he directed prior to Dead Reckoning. But when you're watching it on this giant IMAX screen like I was, and it's just like a bunch of big heads filling the screen, it starts to become a little bit suffocating. You know, once you get to the biplane scene, it's kind of like a breath of fresh air because we're seeing things again. It's wide. So yeah, overall, there is still something that happens when the music swells up and a sequence starts getting momentum. And it really does sweep you up. I do think Haley Atwell was a great addition to the IMF team, and Simon Pegg just delivers a heart to these movies that I love. There's just this vulnerability to his character that has always really grounded it for me. And Ving Rhames, he's always been such a shining light for me in this franchise. He has this gravitas, the way he speaks, so you kind of hang on every single word. So there's still some amazing moments in Final Reckoning. It just didn't need to be 3 hours, and unfortunately, I lost so much patience with the film that it definitely hindered my experience and my enjoyment with the movie. This is the first time I've ever had any real disappointment watching a Mission Impossible movie. I'm really hoping that somehow I will just have a much better experience watching it a second time. I trust the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movies so much that it's hard to even leave what feels like a negative or bad review about them, because there's still something to the craft and care that they put into these films that makes it worth seeing on a big screen, that makes it worth them making these movies. And I do want this movie to be successful so we can still get more movies like this. If this really is the final Mission Impossible movie, it's given us one of the greatest action franchises of all time. I've always had amazing theatrical experiences with these movies, and they've been something to look forward to and be excited about. Anyways, guys, let me know what you guys thought of Final Reckoning in the comments below. If you want to see what I think of all of the Mission Impossible films, then click the link up here to watch my Mission Impossible Ranked video. But otherwise, leave a like, subscribe. Thanks for watching to the end, and we'll catch you next time.